Hello, and welcome to CHD Wise, an education series for patients and families. My name is Rebecca Acosta, and I'm the education coordinator here at Conquering CHD. Today, I'm hosting part two of a discussion with families who have lost a loved one to CHD. I'm joined by Callie, Michelle, Cecile, Cecilia, Swati, and Trey. I'd like to start today's panel by having each one of you introduce yourselves, your families, and the loved one you lost to CHD. Cecile, would you like to go first?
Which Cece?
Oh, Cecilia, sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry. Go ahead, Cecilia.
My name's Cecilia. I lost my first husband, Sam, to congenital heart disorder. This is Sam. He passed away in 2016 in February. After a 5-month battle with recovering from his open heart surgery. So I have been continuing on in his memory to try to get the message out there about CHD and learning other people's stories. And yeah, that's kind of just my short story.
Great, thank you. Swati, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name is Swati, and I am a mom of 2 kids, Caleb and Canaan. Canaan is my youngest, and this is his picture in a box. And Canaan passed away when he was 20 months old, when we least expected it. He came out victoriously through 2 open heart surgeries when we weren't sure if he would survive the surgery because his heart was so thick. He had a biventricular hypertrophy. And ironically, I was a research scientist in the same field. And as hard as it was, when I really hit the bed next to him, I realized how far we were from getting a cure for him. And it was really hard. And he passed away on Jan 2nd, 2018. And in his honor, we started a foundation supporting other, not only just CHD families, but he was diagnosed with Noonan syndrome, but supporting patients who have Noonan. And I work for a company now that supports patients with rare disease, which Canaan was one of the 2 in the world. So I am honored to be his mom. And my oldest is Caleb, who wants me to show that he's a football player and he loves Bengals. So we have in-house rivalry with Steelers and Bengals. So
Wonderful, thank you. Callie.
Hi, I'm Callie Tiroff. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm here to talk about my son. Oh, Theo, you can't, oh, there's the angle. Yes, hit that light. So Theo was born in September. God, I always cry. It's like, I can talk about him all the time. And then sometimes it just, he was born in September 2017. He was my first child. And I found out when I was pregnant with him that he had a cardiac defect called TAPVR. We also found out that he had a chromosomal abnormality, duplication and a deletion on his 2nd chromosome. And unfortunately, he was born 8 weeks early. At 32 weeks. He was born 3 pounds, 3 ounces and required emergency open heart surgery right after he was born. We were in the hospital with him for 6 months. He never got to leave. He was never extubated. And in March of in March of 2018, we made the decision to withdraw care. He just never got better. And I have made peace with that decision. I know we did the right thing, but still living with the pain of not having him here every day and moving forward and trying to honor his name the best way that I can by serving on the board of directors for Conquering CHD and being a part of this world and trying to make a difference as much as I can for the kids still fighting and the adults and people still fighting congenital heart disease.
Thanks, Callie. Michelle.
My name is Michelle Steltzer, and I am a sibling of somebody. My older brother was born with congenital heart disease. He was born in 1968, which he was postnatally diagnosed, and he had single ventricle disease in a small town that nobody knew anything about congenital heart disease. Went to Milwaukee and was diagnosed, and they expected him not to survive until he was 2. He did. Then underwent a classic Blalock toxic shunt by a general surgeon at the time, shortly before I was born. And then continued with that palliation until we were both teenagers in high school in that small town. And he went to have his Fontan surgery. He did well, graduated high school, graduated college, just like I did. We both started our families together. He had multiple medical procedures and further interventions, including a pacemaker, unexpected, hospitalizations, and eventually went to be listed as an inpatient at Mayo in 2014 in September, and was waiting for a heart. He fortunately was able to get a heart after nearly 200 days. Actually, I got a call on Siblings Day in 2015 that he texted me and said that, call mom. At the time, I was with my nursing colleagues, because I became a nurse and then a nurse practitioner, and was with all of my nursing colleagues when I got the call, and immediately, went to Mayo and everything. Unfortunately, he survived the transplant, but did not survive leaving the hospital due to comorbidities, and died in May of 2015. So it's been 5 years now. I'm sorry, that was longer than you expected, Rebecca.
No, thank you for sharing. Cecile, the other Cecile. Oh, you're on mute.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi there, I'm Cecile Michaelis. I'm from Los Angeles, and my daughter is Noah Michaelis, Noah Bella. She was my firstborn, only daughter, and ooh, my battery is running low. Hold on, I'm sorry. I want to make sure
Okay.
this is on. There we go. My daughter Noah Bella, my firstborn, she was born, I found out of her heart condition when I was 20 weeks gestation, and she was born with heterotoxy syndrome, and single ventricle was her worst of the several defects that she had. Similar to Michelle's brother, she had the Fontan procedure. She first had the Glenn procedure, luckily not right out of birth, but at 4.5 months was her first surgery. And then at 4.5 years is when she was able to have her Fontan surgery. There were some complications with that, and 2 months after that, she had to do a redo of her Fontan, so she had it done twice. And in that process, there were surgical issues, which then landed her back into the OR for a third open heart surgery within an 8-month time period to correct some narrowing in her her pulmonary vein, issues that happened during her Fontan procedure. It was a long year, but she made it out, thank God. And she had kind of a miraculous 3 years after that. And then after a good solid 3 years of recovering and building up her strength again, we started noticing certain issues with her. And it was later on diagnosed she had PLE, protein losing enteropathy, which we didn't know anything about at the time. And our hospital here at UCLA knew very little about it and little treatment about it. If anything, it was a transplant, which it kind of still remains that. However, since then, we treated her inpatient at times, at home mostly. And little by little, there are a lot of other cath procedures that took place. And in behind the scenes, long story longer, we later on discovered she had a major lymphatic issue that arose because of all the pressure that was building up in her lungs and affecting all of her organs. That she had some major lymphatic leakage that eventually gave her a disease called plastic bronchitis. And we landed in Children's Hospital Philadelphia. We had to fly all the way over there to get her care. It's the only hospital in the country that actually did a procedure to help with such a disease. Really, the root cause was because of the Fontan procedure. And she had just celebrated her 13th birthday. In November, we went to Philadelphia a month later, spent Christmas there, and she passed away 3 days after New Year's on January 3rd of 2017. At the time, I was 7 months pregnant with my second born. And all the stress from that experience almost gave him a heart condition, believe it or not. But thank God it didn't happen. And he was born a couple months later, and healthy boy. And he's been a good shining light for us. So, but since then, we started a foundation to help other heart families, but particularly those who are struggling with the Fontan procedure and battling with lymphatic disorder because of it. And so we've been putting some research funding and helping families over at UCLA to help that program grow. So there could be 2 surgical centers to help with lymphatic disorders, fighting this kind of thing. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cecile. Last but not least, Mr. Trey. You're on mute, Trey.
Every time. My name is Trey Flynn, and I'm the father of Holden Flynn. Holden, I guess I should show a picture of him. This is, hold on. This is Holden. Holden was born in October of 2011 with a very, very, very severe and complex heart defect. Over the next 14 months after his birth, we had 4 operations to try and not repair, but I guess make his more viable given the complexity of his heart defect. And so Holden in 2013, October 2013 to be exact, was listed for a heart transplant, and was on the waiting list. Luckily, we got to have him at home for that time period. Previously, they had warned us that we'd be stuck in a hospital waiting for the heart transplant and going from there. The day after Thanksgiving in 2013, he was brought to the hospital, and he had to remain there for the duration of his transplant. We spent our second Christmas in the hospital, and waiting for that heart transplant, obviously day by day, hoping that call would come in. In January of 2014, Holden passed away on January 5th from cardiac arrest while awaiting that heart transplant. It was obviously a most difficult day of my life and my wife's life. We struggled for a long time to be the people we could be after that. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm kind of a happy-go-lucky joke type guy. I'm deal with things seriously, but I do so in a joking way. And the best way I could do that during Holden's life was to try and set aside his issues, not set aside, that's a bad terminology, but make light of his issues by nicknaming him. And so before he was born, we found out the 20-week ultrasound that he was going to have a heart defect. I nicknamed him the Tin Man. And the reason for that was because, one, my grandfather loved the Wizard of Oz. He thought it was the greatest movie ever produced. And two, it kind of just fit the mold of everything. So Holden was always known to everyone as the Tin Man. When he went to the hospital, he was Tin Man. When he was on the street, he was Tin Man. The mayor issued a proclamation. This is Tin Man Day. And so after Holden passed, we started a foundation to help families locally. We called it Yellow Brick Road because it kind of fit the mold of everything. And currently I am the board chair of Conquering CHD. I have worked on both a local and national level advocating for policy change and transparency with congenital heart disease. And to this day, I say to everybody when I go out and talk to them, I say, every day that I live is the day I live for Holden, because he's not here to be able to fight this fight anymore. When I wake up in the morning, I think of Holden. When I go and do stuff with my other son, Parker, who's 4 years old and healthy, I think, what would Holden be like if he were here? I have dedicated my life to CHD for that reason. And that's why I am involved with Conquering CHD. That's why we help families locally with their financial assistance. And that's why I'm on this call right now. Holden was an amazing kid. And I know I got to wrap it up here, but I'll just tell you one story about Holden, just so people know what type of kid he was. Holden once needed to have a heart scan in the middle of the night, an echocardiogram, and he was not very cooperative with them. And so doctors gave him multiple doses of drugs to help him be sedated. It got to the point where they needed propofol. And so they gave him the propofol. And he passed out, of course, most people would. So we get him into the room to do the evaluation. And we look through the window, and there it is, Holden with his fist clenched around the V-neck of the doctor, pulling him towards the table, upset that he's in this position. The kid fought through propofol. He fought through everything. That's why I'm here, because I'm carrying on his fight.
I've heard that story so many times, Trey, and I love it every single time. It's great. Thank you all for those beautiful introductions and for sharing pictures of your kiddos and spouse and sibling. I'm going to move into the questions we all talked about a little bit before we came on the call. And feel free to jump in as you're comfortable. We have such great people on the call. I know you guys will share openly and honestly. The first question is really one that I think the CHD community as a whole, and especially non-bereaved families in the CHD community, ask Conquering CHD a lot. So the question is, what do you want other people to know about losing a loved one to CHD?
I can start. It sucks. You're not alone. I was just here at my house with another couple who had lost a child to CHD. We barbecued, our kids hung out, we talked, We talked about Holden. We talked about Monroe. We talked about our lives and how much of an impact they had on us. I think it's important to talk. And if you don't talk about it, you're really, really, really putting yourself in a bad position. And I think one of the most impactful moments I have ever had in my life when it comes to this situation, losing somebody to CHD, was hearing Callie speak in Washington this past year and read her blog, because I have not looked at my blog until she read through hers. I went and looked that night. It's important to talk. Talk. You're not alone.
Rebecca, I can share if that's okay.
Sure.
I think two things, I guess, that you really never get over it. You just figure out how to move through it. And it takes an awful lot of work. And I, as a sibling, my brother Greg was, the closest in sibling. I have three brothers. One of them died, and I have another older and I have another younger brother. And I think one thing that I really want people to know, and what's really important for me to spread awareness, just like Trey, advocacy, talking, going to DC, sharing the story about congenital heart disease, is I really want people to remember the siblings. Greg was 47 years old when he died. I was 45. When he died, I lost a part of my childhood. I lost my best friend and my adult relationship with him in the future. That is not easy to deal with. No matter what age, we need to remember the siblings and the grandparents and everybody in the family, along with the mom and the dad and the spouse and all those other significant people.
Thanks. Anybody else want to have anything to say about what you want others to know about losing a loved one to CHD?
If it's okay, I can go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm like so weepy right now, so I'm sorry if I cry.
No apologies.
So losing a loved one to CHD, I think a lot of people have this notion that somebody with congenital heart issues or heart disease is older, or that they had an unhealthy lifestyle. But I'd really like for people to know that there are people like your children and your brothers and your sisters that are younger, that are older, that have been born with this, that it's been a lifelong struggle, no matter how long that they went through it for. Hearing some of you moms talk about having tiny babies, they all struggled with this for however long that they were alive. So I just want people to know it is not an old person thing. It is not an unhealthy lifestyle thing. Another thing I'd like for people to know is that it is not linear. Grieving is not linear at all. And that goes with any loss. It is a roller coaster, and it is a constant, it's something constant in your life after it happens. And I'd like for people to know that that's not something you simply all of a sudden hit a certain date and you are done grieving. It is something you carry with you.
I just want to add that I always tell people that by mentioning their names, you're not reminding us that they're gone. And we want to hear their names. We want to talk about them. And I think, at least I do. And so the best thing that can happen if you want to be supportive, because I know as a heart community, we're all close and we all talk to each other. If somebody loses somebody, it's okay to keep talking about them, because I always say that Theo is the wind at my back. not something that stops me. I didn't let my grief paralyze me from moving forward. Maybe in the beginning I did, but I think that keep saying their names because you're not reminding us. We already know. If I cry, it's because I miss them, and that's okay. And I think people are just scared to talk about bereavement and to talk about this issue because it's sad and it's uncomfortable. And nobody dealing currently with CHD wants to think about dying. So, but unfortunately, that's a part of the world that we live in, and we're all evidence of the fact that we can. We're kind of the nightmare, and so it can be scary for people to bring it up and talk about it for many reasons, but we shouldn't be, and it shouldn't be so taboo. So I would say that we need to keep talking and keep using this loss and this grief and this pain as fuel to better the lives of people living with CHD. And I feel like that's what most of us are trying to do.
I would add to that. Some of the things that I often hear, having spoken on several panels and being on the scientific review board with PC4, is that there are cultures where it is a taboo that you've lost a child or your child is sick. And I think that is a taboo that I hear in Indian culture or some other cultures, which is very common, and people are not open about the heart defect, let alone losing a child to a heart defect. They think they've done something wrong, and it's not in your genes. My son did not have a genetic mutation. It was a spontaneous mutation. It just happened by chance. But even if it did, that doesn't make him less of my son. I'm still very proud of him. I'm still very privileged to be his mother because my life has changed in ways that I cannot think would have changed if I didn't have him. So I'm honored to be his mother. And I think people need to step up and believe that and not have pity over themselves. And that is so important to recognize in cultures. And I've had many people tell me, because I've spoken on behalf, or they identify with me with certain culture, they identify that it's okay to speak and it's okay to bring awareness. It's okay to lose a child. Yes, it is not the norm, but it happens. And then you deal with it by being open about it. And there is a supportive community. Of course, at any phase of life, there is no support in certain things, but that's how life is. Not everybody's going to join the bandwagon. And if they don't, it's okay. And it's okay to find that community that supports you. And I think the other thing that I wanted to mention, it doesn't matter the age. When you lose a child or when you lose a loved one, the loss is the same and the grief is the same. It could be 10 days or 10 years. The pain is intense either ways. So I think a lot of people have had in the beginning told me, oh, he was just with you 20 months, so it's okay. It's not okay. It's never okay. Even if it was with me 20 days, it's never okay. So that time doesn't matter. It's just hard. Just as pregnancy loss is hard, infant loss is hard, any loss of a loved one, if you've gone through it, it is hard. So that's all I want to add.
We can add that to the list of things you don't say to somebody. I know
we'll
that's coming later, but let's just put that right on that list, okay? You don't say that. Nope.
Cecile, did you want to add anything?
I mean, really, everyone here has said everything that I've even personally experienced too. I could echo every single one of them, and I've had from adults to even kids, Noah's friends, Noah's cousins, who you could tell even after almost 4 years of not having her here with us presently, I could tell there's a sense of them being hesitant to bring up her name, or hesitant to even bring up an example of a story of one time this happened. And I can just sense it when I see them. And I literally will stop and pause and say, it's okay. You could talk about Noah, because I love talking stories about Noah. And there's healing in that. And yeah, there's so much pain. We will always grieve. And there'll be days where we grieve a little less than yesterday. And then tomorrow we'll grieve 10 times harder because some random act of something came up and just reminded you of them, and you just lose it, or a story comes up, or a sign, a symbol, something that reminds you of them. And but I do tell people that it's okay to bring her up and bring up a story from a long time ago, or, and those are the moments are really, I find so there's so much healing in that. And then in addition to healing, you know, I think people need to know that our stories about their condition, even some details about what they went through, educates people a whole lot about CHD. You know, whether they passed away when they were infants, a few months old, or several years later into their adulthood, you know, there's so much that they've suffered through that no one knows what that feels like, what that even looks like. And I think it's a good opportunity for us to talk about it. And I try to use those moments with family, with friends, with people that I mean, random people that I meet at the grocery store who will suddenly ask me if the son that I'm holding, you know, next to me is my only child. And it's like, oh gosh, those are some of the times the worst questions, you know. But I think using those moments of somewhat uncomfortableness is a good opportunity to educate people.
Thank you all so much. Our next question is a little more lighthearted, I hope. Question number 2 is, how do you honor your loved ones year round during holidays or anniversaries, birthdays, or other special dates in your family?
There's a few ways. Excuse me. So every year we spent 2 Christmases in the hospital. And so every year on Christmas Day, which unfortunately won't happen this year because there's a little virus out there. But every year on Christmas Day, we go down to the hospital and we open up our own barista coffee shop, and we make like barista style coffees. I was a barista when I was 16. So I took that experience of being a barista for 3 months when I was 16 and put it to good work. On Christmas Day in the hospital, much isn't open, but we go around to the entire hospital, not just a cardiac unit, but the entire hospital. And we offer the patients, the families, the staff, a barista style coffee on Christmas Day, because, you know, who doesn't want a latte, especially when it's free and made by somebody who did this for 3 months of their life. But for real, the big idea of that is really celebrating the fact that our son did have, and I say celebrate loosely, please don't take it in a bad manner, but in a way to say, you know, we've been there. We spent 2 Christmases in the hospital. In fact, the hospital gave me the greatest gift I ever had in my life. They let me sneak my son out for 3 hours to go see my family, you know, 2 weeks before he passed away. I think that is without a doubt the biggest way I carry on Holden's life. Every Christmas Day, we're at the hospital and families are asking, why are you here? And I tell them why. And it goes back to kind of the last question of talking about Holden. I have no issues telling him. It's important to me. So.
If it's okay, if nobody else is going, I would love to share. So depending on the holiday, we always have a little something planned. And for his birthday, I usually have my family get together and we have like a little birthday party. We try to keep it lighthearted and listen to his favorite music. Just kind of all spend time together. I'm remarried, so for anniversaries though, like Sam's and my wedding anniversary, my new husband and I actually go out to dinner every year and we celebrate. Sorry, I just realized how awesome that is, but he takes me out every year and we celebrate my wedding anniversary. You know, Christmas, we go to the cemetery, we keep an ornament on the tree with some of his hair. We try to just do something. I mean, I remember him every day. you know, I do what I do now, and I live the life that I do now because of Sam. But especially on holidays, because they still suck and are hard 5 years later. I do something that I can to honor him in any way that I can, whether, you know, that's going to the cemetery or celebrating with family. I do try on the anniversary of his passing, February 7th. I try to do an act of kindness, and try to get others to do the same thing in his honor, whether that's, you know, this year I bought somebody coffee behind me. I just try to do something to keep his memory, you know, going. So.
I think, well, I try to do stuff year round. For Christmas, I have his, what are those beads? The beads of courage that at Children's Week, they get beads. I don't know if it's like that at every Children's, but for every poke, for every PT, for every whatever, you get a bead. You get a bead when they pass away. Like right when you're walking out the door, it's like, thanks. It's a butterfly. And I use that as garland on our Christmas tree. So it has his name in it. And I was really like doing that. And then I try to constantly talk about him on my social media. And then I think the thing that I really put a lot of passion into is planning the Heart and Soul 5K for Conquering CHD, and through our nonprofit Project Bubbaloo, we called Theo Bubbaloo, and getting people involved, and really every ounce of my love for him gets put into getting people to come out and raising money. And every year, it's been the second year now that we've done it, and the more people we get involved, the more I just feel you know, it's not his face or anything, but I put him on every flyer, and I do everything because I want everyone to see him. And it's just that's my love story to him, is to continue to try to do that. And that takes up pretty much half of my year usually. So I'm on a break right now. And then I just moved into a new house, and we planted a tree for him in our backyard. And it's somewhere I feel like I can feel like he's here. So it's hard for me to go to his grave. So I feel like I can visit him or have him close to me with that. So
I can go if nobody wants to go next. We actually started the foundation on Canaan's first birthday in heaven, and we distributed what we call the Conquerors bags, which basically were people, because we stayed so much longer in the hospital, 4.5 to 6 months. We distributed bags, which we thought was more necessary for long-term people who stayed long-term, and we continued doing that for his birthday. And for his anniversary, which is Jan 2nd, right after the holidays, is always a hard time when you're coming out. And my parents in India distribute food to the orphanages around them. And we continue to support families either during Christmas by books, because I used to read a lot of books to my kids. With Canaan, that was the one normal thing that I could do while he was in the hospital, sedated and everything, just read the books. So for Christmas, we usually distribute books to Children's Hospital and get donations for that. People can donate, but now because of COVID, everything is shut off. And usually because I'm on the Conquering CHD Ohio board, so I know when lunches or dinners are going for Father's or Mother's Day. So I try to alternate for one of those holidays, because when you're staying in the hospital, after a point, the cafeteria food gets to you. So I always love to get them food. My husband and I try to do it for one of Canaan's anniversaries or one of the events, but it has been hard with COVID. But thankfully, there are some nurses which we know who have been helping us to help get the food. So, and my 7-year-old had an idea after Canaan's first birthday in heaven that we got a cake every year for him. So now every year on Canaan's birthday, people who have supported us and loved ones who understand, we cut a cake for Canaan and distribute the cake to whoever is there for the party. So just celebrating his presence with us and being with us. So that's what we do.
Does anyone else want to add in anything before we go on?
Just briefly, I guess, personally, what we do is every summer we go and spend a week down in San Diego, and we rent a beach house with our family. And that was like one thing that Noah really, really loved, seeing all of her cousins and aunts and uncles, a big reunion every year. And the first year that we went back to the beach without her, we all decided to have a day called Pink Day. Every day is something. And so we designated one of the days as her day. And so pink was, was her favorite color. So everyone wears pink. Like there's like 30 of us, 40 of us, and everyone wears pink. And the entire menu for the day is based on the foods that she loved. And everyone shares stories. It's a lot of fun. We fly kites all day because that's what she does. And every year since then, we've been doing the same thing for her birthday, is fly kites on her birthday, and do a little small celebration. But on a sort of larger scale, Noah always wanted to give back, whether it was her birthday or, and really any other time, but we sort of used her birthday as sort of the anniversary to do that. She turned 16 last year. So sort of for her big sweet 16, we wanted to raise money to help the doctors over at UCLA travel back and forth to CHOP. And so we wanted to help pay for that type of, as much as we could for that training. So I gathered a bunch of people. There's like 15 of us, and we hiked 16 miles through the Santa Monica Mountains, and we all fundraised for it. And it was a wonderful experience. We raised like 25 grand just in that one day. We fundraised all month for it, which was wonderful, but it was sort of a larger way of honoring her. And each mile was each year. So it felt like every time we got further through the mountain, it was one more hard year that we conquered for her. So there was such deep meaning there for all of us. And so we try to do some lightly personal things for us, and then try to share her love of giving by helping others through our foundation.
I want to share two things, actually. One, this year has been a particularly hard year because it's 5 years. And so for the Conquering Congenital Heart Disease walk that got delayed a bit because of COVID, thank you, COVID again. I started a group for single ventricle families that specifically honoring those who are bereaved, that, and honoring them. And then on a more simpler scale, I just wanted to share one story. And again, like, I had 45 years with Greg, and we grew up and, root beer floats were like a thing. We would always go with families, we'd have to stop at A&W and get a root beer float. And in true sibling form, sibling rivalry form, when Greg was in the hospital waiting for all those, days, I would try to go up once a month and, spend the weekend and, spend as much time as I could. And it was hard to keep focused on things other than medical stuff. And so we would always banter about like, what's the best root beer, and I was like, at that time I was in the Milwaukee area, and I was like, Sprecker's better, Sprecker's better than A&W. And I was all about like, rivalry. And he's like, yeah, no, A&W is the best, So I started a root beer float challenge, and I engaged all the nurses and doctors and tried to, spin them my way that Sprecher was the best. But scientific evidence showed that A&W won. So whenever, there's birthdays and things like that, it doesn't matter, like you don't have to be in the same place, which is nice in COVID. We can remember, on Greg's birthday, his date of his death, and all those other moments in between when you just want to remember him. We have a root beer float on him and remember him. We had it at his funeral too, to celebrate his life.
Thanks for sharing, guys. The next question, I think this group of folks is really well equipped to answer. How do members of your circle, your family circle, process grief differently between parents, siblings, grandparents, other extended family, friends? Does anybody want to speak to that?
I'll go if no one's going. I don't know. Swati, you want to go ahead?
Oh, that's fine. Go ahead.
One example that I could think of right now is Noah's best friend, Ethan, who actually happens to live in Las Vegas. He used to live out here, but he's moved. And he wanted to really echo Noah's love for giving and her love for reading and her love for writing. And so he started a year ago to honor for her birthday, for her 16th birthday, he wanted to start a free little library for her. So he did, and he did all the work. He applied for it, got the little license for it, and now it's in front of his house in Henderson for the entire neighborhood. And interestingly enough, the closest library to their entire neighborhood is a few miles away. It's like not very close. So it was something that everyone actually really loved. And it turns out that his house is right along a walkway where all these kids have to use as a thoroughway to walk to school. And so there's quite a bit of foot traffic. They've just recently opened the library. They had closed it all these months for COVID. But they put some extra special steps to help with making sure that things are safe when you check out a book and give a book. But I thought that was really just wonderful that such a young kid wanted to do something to help his grief, and it really helped him a whole lot.
Thank you for sharing. We've talked offline, but I live in the same city as Ethan, so I'll get with you and figure out where this little library is and go take my kids for a visit for sure. Anyone else?
I think I didn't have that experience, but Caleb was my older son, Caleb was 3.5, 4. And for a significant part of his earlier life, when he was excited about his brother, Canaan, it was like he was in the hospital and all we did was in the hospital. So Caleb had a hard time understanding that kids go out of the hospital. So when Canaan went home, when he went, Caleb did not understand it. He just thought everybody had come home because that's what happened. All of my family, we have very limited family. Most of my family is in India. We have a few relatives. My brother-in-law and my sister at that time was working here. So they had come in. So he thought every time they came in, that was how it was. And Canaan was in the hospital. And this time when he moved to the funeral house, Caleb for a long part of the time did not understand why everybody came to visit Canaan in the hotel-like hospital. So it was a really hard time for me to explain it to him, to help him understand, but I just left it at that the angels took him to heaven. And he just kept thinking that, yes, but one fine day he did understand for himself that Canaan was not coming back. And that was a normal process. And then once he understood that, Canaan became a part of his everyday life. So everybody in class thought that Caleb had a brother, Canaan, for a long time, till he said, no, my brother is in heaven now. I just show his picture everywhere I go. And I think just between the spouses, my husband and I process very differently. My husband literally lived in the hospital for the 6 months that Canaan was for the last 6 months of his life. And obviously, so it's very different than I, who was shuttling back and forth. And for me, it was even harder just because I had the understanding of the science and the medical knowledge. So I preferred not to stay because it would drive me crazy. Not that it did any less, but my husband stayed most of the time. So we processed it very differently. And it took some time, and even now, like many of us have echoed in this, that it hits you at a time when you least expect it. So it's a process.
I think I'll move on to another question. We're getting short on time, so I want to make sure you all have the chance to speak to other bereaved families in the CHD community and share any of your favorite supports, whether there's some books or websites that really helped you, retreats, support groups online or in person, anything that you'd like to share that you'd want other bereaved families to know about that helped you.
I don't know if there's any books or websites that I ever went to or viewed, and I think a lot of people would echo that in my position, although I don't want to speak for other people. I think it's talking to people. As I said earlier, one of the biggest things we had, one of the biggest crutches, I guess we had, was that we had another couple that we befriended in the hospital that lost their kid about 10 days after. Was that me?
I think so.
Sorry. One of the biggest things we had, and I know not every family's afforded this, is that we had friends we met in the hospital who lost their child about 10 days after Holden passed. And obviously we've remained friends since that day. They come over, we hang out all the time, we do stuff together all the time. Our Parker, my 4-year-old, and their son Teddy, who's 3, are very close. They're friends. And I think that was the biggest crutch for me. And now I know not everyone's going to have that crutch. But if it does exist, it's important. Understand. There's people out there that have been through this, and whether it's 10 days or 2 years, they can play an important role in supporting you through this process. Because without Sarah and Milan, I don't know if Nicole and I could have gotten to the point we're at, being honest.
I think it's important to lean on who you want to lean on. You're gonna feel, I felt very blessed with all the support that I had, but there were a lot of people, grief can be very selfish. I just didn't care about anything else but how sad I was and how terrible the situation was. And so there were friends that I really leaned on, and then there's friends that, not because I was upset or mad, it's just I just leaned on who I felt comfortable talking to. So you're not going to be able to seek comfort from everybody, and that's okay. Therapy, whether it's one-on-one or like group therapy, can be helpful. I know that for me, I went to a grief support group, and it was for parents who lost kids under the age of 2. And I only went once because I just felt like it was different. And I'm not saying mine was worse or better, nothing like that. It's just, I didn't find comfort in doing that. So you have to do whatever it is you feel can give you some level of support. And for everybody, it's different. So if you find that on social media through support groups, great. If you have a friend that's gone through the same thing and you can rely on them for support back and forth, great. But it's so different for everyone, and there's not one right way.
Callie, you said it like really awesomely. So I don't want to like throw it down, but yeah, we did the same thing. We went to a support group for parents who lost children, and we, did the counseling route. And I think that it's so specific to a parent that you have to keep an open mind on things. Don't shut things out, but at the same time, don't feel that if something's not working that you failed, because there are things that don't work. We did the parent support group for a couple weeks, and then we said, hey, this really isn't for us. This is not helping at all. And so, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to commandeer, but I do agree. And I guess that's what I was kind of going at, is that, our biggest support came from our friends. And that's not always the case for for some people. Some people need that support group. Some people need that therapist. And so it's important to keep an open mind as to where your avenues are.
So for me, I was actually, while Sam was sick, I was in some groups for people with heart disorders. He was supposed to receive an LVAD and he was on a transplant list. So I was in some groups for those. And I no longer felt like I belonged. So I immediately just kind of deleted those and started joining groups for widows on Facebook. And I was surprised. I think I didn't know at the age that I was. I mean, I was 25 when my husband passed. And I think before then, I didn't really think about people losing spouses that young. So I thought when I was joining these groups that these were all going to be, older couples that had lived a very long life together. And so I was immediately a little bit nervous, but I've actually found some really great communities on Facebook with widows, because there are people that somehow unfortunately lose their spouses way too young. And I found connections with people that went through something maybe similar and just understand grief. I started going, there was a local support group for anybody that had lost anyone. I went a couple of times, kind of like Callie, it just didn't feel like it fit. I didn't feel like I belonged. So something that actually did help me though, I'm actually getting an English degree right now in writing and publishing. And I've always had an itch to write and read. And so something that I really found comfort and enjoyment in, I guess you could say, was writing. I started writing a blog about grief and how I felt and dreams I had about Sam, or things I was feeling, dating my now husband, and how that was going for me, dealing with grief while loving somebody. Just kind of writing my feelings out was something really helpful for me, which again might not be for everybody. Like my now husband hates writing, so some people aren't into the same ways to find comfort that others are. But for me, it was something very cathartic to write my feelings and share them with others that might be feeling something similar. You just have to find your own thing.
I think I agree with most of you that, we all find our own niche where we find our comfort in. And for me, that was my faith. And I was at a point where we didn't blog anything about it. It was a very personal life, and we just kept it to ourselves, even within family. And it was just through faith that we were moving, praying, and believing. And we had the doctors testify about it, or we had videos where doctors wrote to us later on. And that is what helped me. I never went to a psychiatrist or therapist, and that may not be for everybody, but that for me, just leaning on God and helping me, because 3 years down the line, when you're still grieving, I felt God was the only one who understood what I was going through. It wasn't because people after a point say, it's been 3 years. People expect you to move on after 6 months. People expect you to move on. And then I have no expectations from them. So early on, that's how it was for me. And I saw so much of presence and peace. And I don't think I would have led to do what I'm doing now if it wasn't for the strength of God in my life. So for me, that was very essential. And one of my favorite people who became a very good friend after this. We both lost our children. She was an advanced nurse practitioner, and she lost her faith in God, but we're still so connected despite her faith and despite my faith. And we both shared how we went, and we're still such good friends. She's blessed with a beautiful baby now. I'm so happy for her. But you don't know how God, for me, it was like how God could bring people into my life. So I thank God for that.
I just wanted to share, echo a little bit on what people have already talked about. And Cecilia, your thoughts about, finding groups. I found some on Facebook too. I did go to therapy to help understand. And for me, I guess and journaling was really important, because it helped write things down and helped me talk it out, find the people to talk with. For me, when this all happened, when Greg died, I was a nurse. I took care of congenital heart disease, and I'd seen people die before. And Greg taught me a lot of empathy, and I think I'm a good nurse because of him. but when Greg died, it was like a bolt of lightning, you know, like it was just so powerful. And, you know, I was born and raised a big Catholic, and my mom was very Catholic, and I had so many questions, and talking to people, trying to find the right people who will listen to your story over and over and over. And, you know, Swati, when you were talking about, you know, 3 years ago, you know, 3 years have passed and you still have questions. Like I had questions, you know, and I had to go back to Dr. Seta and talk about things. And like, it's really tough, and you don't know what you're going to need. And I think being patient to honoring your questions, getting the answers to what they are, and you know, being thoughtful about the process is really important. Early on in the journey, I felt so alone and so lost. My parents were grieving immensely. Their first year, they didn't want to talk. You know, it was hard to go to them. It was hard to go to my brothers. My older brother had lost his wife within 3 months of Greg's death. And, you know, they're like, I didn't really have a lot of people to talk to. And, but I did learn a lot from, I remember a light bulb moment listening to a TED talk by, I think it was, I can't remember his name, Jeff Kruger, about siblings. And I'm telling you, that was a light bulb moment. I was like, oh, that's why I feel this way. And it was really helpful. And it took me probably a month to get to that point, but being patient with yourself and talking and relying on your family is really, really important.
I was taking notes here as you guys mentioned these resources I can share with the community. So thank you so very much. The last one, I want to give you guys an opportunity to just quick fire everything that people have said to you that you don't want them to say again. Teach us all. What are things that you want anyone in the CHD community or just in the public realm not to say or do with bereaved families?
I think I'll take.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when you are at someone's funeral for that person that has passed, and I'm speaking it as a spouse, don't ever tell that spouse, you're young, you'll find someone else. Don't do it. Just don't. Just don't.
I had to add to that. I had someone who came to the funeral, and they said, well, anyway, he was sick, so it's okay. It's never okay. You know, when was the last time one of your child was sick and you wanted him to die because he was sick? He was never a burden, because you can never understand that. I had people tell my parents who were grandparents to my son, you know, he was such a burden, so maybe this will relieve you. It doesn't relieve you. And it was never a burden for them. So please, just because you didn't walk through it, that's why you didn't have that privilege. We have that privilege and we are very honored. So it is not a burden. And B, just because I have another child doesn't make this easier, or just because I can have the childbearing capacity does not, because each child is so unique and so special that it doesn't make it better. Even if I had 10 children, Canaan would still be my very special child. And even if he's in heaven, it still doesn't cut it. So please do not bring your religious thoughts about it, because God has a way of dealing with me that you can't.
Well said. Gosh, so Henry was born, you know, 2 months after Noah passed away. And so many people, my closest friends, several relatives, neighbors, you name it, all said, well, you have Henry now, so it's going to be okay. And it was like a dagger in my heart. And you know, they're trying to be kind. They're thinking that, you know, well, he'll give me happiness, so it'll heal my heart, you know. That's absolutely not true, ever. Like, that will never be true. I mean, yes, of course, I think Henry, for sure, if he wasn't here, I'd probably be in a worse place. But he certainly doesn't make it all better. And so just because someone has lost a child and they have other children, that their other children are going to be sort of that replacement. It's okay now, you've got your other kids to keep you happy. So there's definitely a misunderstanding there. And I've had in the beginning, I didn't correct anyone. But after a while, I just got so tired of it that I started to just politely put my foot down and say, that's not really okay to say, just so you know. And it was a good wake up call, because I think they stand corrected and to not make that mistake again.
Oh, my favorite is everything happens for a reason.
I agree.
Exactly that. Okay, well, yeah, that doesn't make me feel better. That does not help. There is no reason that I can think of that it makes sense that my son died. So that is, even if you do believe that, and even if there's some days that I believe that, right? I am remarried. I'm pregnant with another baby. I've been blessed since Theo has passed away. But never tell me that it happened because that maybe I can feel that, but you can't tell me that. I get very upset every time, and going off of what other people have said is, you just need to have another baby. That's the other doozy, that it's, you cannot say that to somebody. And I definitely have no hesitation telling you that you can't. So it doesn't happen a lot, but it's very hurtful, because what you're telling me is that he's better off with somewhere else than with me. And I don't care if it's a religious thing for you. It might not be for me. You don't know how that person deals with their grief. You don't know if they believe in heaven or believe in God. And I'm not saying that I don't, but you don't know. So it might not bring someone comfort when you're trying to reassure them about the afterlife, or that it's okay that this happened. That's just my very strong opinion about things, but just because it comes from pain and people are trying to be helpful, but it's usually not.
If you don't mind, if I could add on to that, and this is, and I'd like to even just express this too. I know Swati talked about your good friend, who struggles with God, and I certainly have been tested with my relationship with God. And when kids survive their open heart surgery, we give thanks to God, and we give thanks to God every day. But they say God is good. And then when your child passes away, they say it was God's plan. And I've had so many people say that to me as well. And without knowing what my religious, preference is, and I took offense to that, and I still take offense to that it's just unfair to anyone to put that on anybody. That's a huge weight of acceptance of something else having a plan for your child to die, so yeah, I think people really misinterpret the weight that religion or spirituality take on someone who's grieving.
That's very well said, Cecile. I did have that earlier but I was blessed with a wonderful pastor who helped me find my relationship with God and help me understand that this is not what God is trying to tell you. So I had people who came up to me, maybe there was a sin in their life. And I was like, you know what? I don't need to hear all this. And this needs to shut up, because that's not the way God is dealing with me. And I don't need to hear this. And I had a wonderful support system through the church who never left me and said, this is not God speaking to you. God is a good God. And that's how it helped me. And I agree with a lot of people pulling up those religious strings, knowing that they know everything and they can set this right, they cannot set this right, and I have actually said to a pastor, and I said, no, this is not the plan of God for my life. I know God is good, but this is not the plan of them. I don't want to talk about it, and that was it. You have to sometimes step up and speak up, like Callie said.
So something that really also bothered me was, and I've had this happen several times. And obviously I'm okay with how my life, this is going to sound wrong to maybe other people, but I've come to terms with the way that my life plan has worked out, and I'm happy. I'm very grateful for my life. And I wouldn't have this life if it weren't for Sam. But something that just bothers me, that people feel like they need to make sure that they justify certain things. A lot of people had told me, you know, they'd ask me, well, did you guys have children? And I'd say no. You know, we were newly married. We were only married 5 months when he passed. And they're like, oh, thank God. And I'm like, you know what? I feel like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because being so young, I felt like I missed out on so many things, not even just children, but like we missed out on a honeymoon. We missed out on having children. We missed out on growing old. And so trying to tell somebody that, oh, well, thank God your grief is easier because you don't have this, did not make it any easier. And I, kind of like what you guys said, I finally stepped up and actually spoke up and said, look, not okay. It's not okay for you to try to justify things and try to make my grief seem better because I didn't have to deal with children or something. Because to me, that really hurt me. Personally, you know, with Sam, he always wanted children. And so being told like, well, thank God, you know, you didn't have to be left behind with children was really hurtful for me. And yes, maybe that would have been really horrible to have dealt with. And I obviously wouldn't have the life I do now with children. It would have been very different, but don't tell people what's better or not in grief because they have or don't have something, or try to justify something that, you know, with God, like, well, God said this, or just say sorry and be there for me. Don't try to make it less uncomfy, because I'm already uncomfortable with grieving. I'm dealing with feelings. I don't need to be told the way to do it, if that makes sense.
Does anyone else want to share anything before we wrap up? Well, I want to thank each of you for joining the panel and me tonight and sharing your hearts and your family members with all of us. Before we leave, I want to give the CHD community some actionable steps. It's just what I do. So they can really learn and support bereaved families that they're close with. The first one, which you all said tonight, is just to talk about those that we have lost to CHD. It's a fact. It's ugly and unfair, and we wish it wasn't part of this roller coaster, but it is. So talk about them, say their names, remember them, share stories about them with their family members, with your family members, within your community. The other thing I would like to ask the community at large is just to consider everyone in the family circle when there is a loss. Like we've heard tonight, spouses, siblings, grandparents, extended family, close friends are often left out of the grief conversation. And so I think it's really important. I really appreciate especially Cecilia and Michelle coming and sharing your unique perspectives that does not often get heard in these conversations. And then the last one I would like for everyone to do is just to really talk to your care team, advocate for mental health support and social support for all CHD families, bereaved and living. I think that's super important. There are some centers that have robust departments, and then there are some that are just getting on the wagon for this. But I really think it's something that we can all do at our centers and just say, this is the CHD community needs us. So in closing the panel tonight, I'd like to share a quote from Vicki Harrison. Grief is like the ocean. It comes in waves, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes the water is calm, and sometimes it is overwhelming. All we can do is learn to swim. So in honor of Theo and Greg, Noah, Canaan, Holden, and Sam, we thank again for joining us, and we will see you next time.